when we see the money that the global north is actually trying to commit to the fights against climate change, if we see it as an handout, they will never do it. We are not begging them for it. We should make it's like an inspiration for what they've done, for the havoc they've committed to the environment. It should be an obligation. It should be mandatory. Because if we don't make it mandatory, they won't actually see it. They won't see the need for them to make that commitment.
Hello and a warm welcome to On Rights, Crime and Justice, coming to you from Gringo TV. Today we'll be spotlighting some critical issues shaping the global fight for social justice. As each year, the United Nations recognizes World Day of Social Justice as a moment to reflect on the persistent inequalities that define our world. And last week on the 20th of February, the World Social Justice Day was celebrated with this year's theme hinged on strengthening the just transition for a sustainable future. It shows that the urgent need for an inclusive shift towards an environmentally sustainable economy is very key. And today we'll be diving into these key issues such as the impact of climate change on social justice, gender disparities in labor, and how global conflicts continue to challenge our efforts towards equity and peace. Joining the program is Emma Sampson, Communications Manager at Serious Business. Itiete Omojevie, Coordinator Community Youth Response Initiative. And with these experts, we'll be tackling this very important discussion. So I want to start with you, Emma. How are you doing today? Thank you for joining the program.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so let's just get right onto it. This year's Social Justice Day was anchored on the theme of strengthening the just transition move, and looking at the concept of just transition being trying to ensure that we have environmental sustainability and social equity going hand in hand. So looking back at the various events and the policy actions so far last year, 2024, and now in 2025, first of all, how much would you say we have achieved this move towards a just transition? What's the progress in analyzing in your own expert analysis? How would you address or analyze the progress that we've made towards achieving this just transition on a global scale?
Well, I mean, first of all, I think the just transition has not really begun. It is an ongoing process. It's going to take a very long time for it to be executed properly, but it is firmly on the agenda now. It runs through all of the big environmental discussions that are happening in the world. So at least it's being recognized as being an important topic. With regard to the plastic sector, which of course, like I'm mostly involved in, we are seeing that some very positive discussions around just transitioning happening with the global plastic treaty negotiations, for example. Most of the states, although they can't agree on very many things, they nearly all agree that a just transition is absolutely vital in any kind of measures that are brought in by the Global Plastic Treaty. These are quite complicated because, of course, if you want to do things like reduce production of plastic or reduce production of plastic products and affecting things like waste management, these are going to affect people's lives disproportionately across the world. You may result in job losses or other impacts on food and water supplies chains. So it's really important that you look at a holistic view of the impacts of any measures brought in. How are they going to affect the environment, but also how are they going to affect people? From our point of view, as Serious Business, we believe that the circular economy for plastics and that improving the environment in general will have positive outcomes for all people, and will also create more economic opportunities for people across the world if it is done properly from the beginning. And most importantly, involving those people in the negotiations and in the planning from the very, very beginning. And unfortunately, that's still quite limited access to the global decision making for these marginalized groups. So we'd like to see more done for funding and supporting these people's participation in the negotiations from the beginning.
All right, thank you so much, Emma. Let me come to you now, Itiete. I think you have to teach me the pronunciation of your name. I'm pretty sure I'm not getting it right. But last year, it became more obvious. Now, looking at the talk on climate change, last year it was very obvious, without a doubt, in a lot of countries, how climate change hits the marginalized communities the hardest, despite their minimal contribution to the problem. So the COP29 came, as we saw, and we saw the Global North's failure to commit to supporting these communities, most especially financially. So now, reflecting on these actions seen in the international community and the failure of the COP29 to meet our expectations on financial backing in terms of the climate crisis that we saw. So do you think that the international community is really committed to achieving this social justice everywhere? So let me hear your thoughts on that, Emma, and then we'll go back to him. So what do you think about the outcome of the COP29? Looking at the outcome and the failure to meet a financial agreement that was plausible, especially for the Global South, do you think the international community is really committed to achieving social justice everywhere?
I think it's very complicated. Yeah, there's always going to be disparities, and a lot of these things, the global, sort of the more wealthier nations have always had more economic and political power when it comes to these sorts of things. But I do see the conversation shifting, but there is no commitment financially. Yeah, I want to speak more about plastic pollution because it's my area of expertise, but what we see is that the communities who are the most affected are living on small islands, for example, or in the Global South. It's very difficult for them to travel to these big negotiations like COP and the Global Plastic Treaty, and they just don't get a voice.
All right, thank you so much, Emma. I don't know if Itiete can hear me. Itiete, are you back? Are you with us? Can you hear me?
First of all, my name is pronounced as Itiete Omojiri.
Okay.
That's my name. You tried to call me, but we didn't get it right.
Thank you.
Omojiri.
Yeah.
Now, for that question, like I will always tell people, especially climate enthusiasts, that when we see the money that the Global North is actually trying to commit to the fights against climate change, if we see it as an handout, they will never do it. We are not begging them for it. These are very key questions. We are seeing it as an handout they are just giving us. We should make it's like a reparation for what they've done, for the havoc they've committed on the environment. So it shouldn't be as if we are begging them to commit. It should be an obligation. It should be mandatory. Because if we don't make it mandatory, they won't actually see it. They won't see the need for them to make that commitment. Because what they actually just give is just a petri sum of what the havoc is actually cost. Let me be focused on Nigeria and Black Sahara Africa. The havoc they've actually caused. So what they committed was nothing to write home about compared to the disaster actually meted on us, because we don't actually have what it takes to be able to mitigate the effects of this climate change, which they contributed more than 90% in creating. So I think what they've actually contributed to the fight, what they've actually contributed, is nothing to write home about. And I think if we keep it this way, we actually get nothing from them. Let them see it as compulsory. Let them see it as they are making restitution for the evil and the things they've actually done to developing countries and the poor down here in Africa and some parts of Asia.
Can I interject?
Thank
I
you so
just want to
much.
say
Oh, sure.
that I was just going to say that you shouldn't really think of it as a handout anyway. It's an investment in the future for the world. It isn't about giving money to developing countries to support them. You're supporting the future for a global future, because climate change isn't something that happens in isolation, as is plastic pollution or biodiversity loss. These are things that's going to affect everybody all over the world. So if you don't invest now, you will pay for it later. So these funding and granting options that we're trying to do now, you're right, it should be mandatory. It's a cost, it's restitution, but it's also investment in the future.
Okay. I think his point, because now when people make those points, it's usually as a result of the fact that they say that the reason why we are where we are now in climate change is because of the actions of this global South leaders, I mean countries rather. So, I mean, of course it's an investment in the future, that's for sure, but also there's also the part where, they brought us where we are now, and they should be able to commit to allowing us to move forward from that. So, but of course we would agree with that. So yeah, all right, so let's just continue with the conversation. Itiete, I want to stay with you. Looking at a bit of global policy shifts that has happened. For instance, we've had Trump sworn in this year as the U.S. president. And ever since Trump was sworn into office, we've had a wave of executive orders that have been sweeping through the global system from the White House. And some, of course, we're on the topic of social justice, and some critics have argued that some of his policies from the Trump administration have had adverse effects on social justice, especially for the developing countries, and even to the ones that are even developed. We see some of his policies looking so vindictive, and some have said the policies are inhumane, both domestically and globally. So first of all, do you agree with this? And in your view, which of the policies so far do you think would have a negative impact on the developing countries, and how should we move forward from these situations that we find ourselves in?
First of all, I totally agree with that postulation that the emergence of Donald Trump has actually pushed climate change, has actually pushed it backward. And so many of his policy executive orders that he has actually impacted negatively on what we are trying to fight. Many of the efforts that we have actually put in place over the years has actually been somehow, the emergence of the current president of America, Donald Trump, has actually taken us back. And there are so many of his policies, his executive orders that he has given out that has actually taken us back. I can mention maybe a few of them. I wrote it, I jotted it somewhere. So many of his, so like the rolling back racial justice effort that the Trump is an executive order, the anti-racism report of, I think, in the 17th century, when Trump came, he actually abolished it. The anti-immigration policy that was actually going to include, that's actually going to be a very huge tool for social justice, he actually abolished it. And we can see the way that the emergence of President Donald Trump has actually set us back in terms of inclusivity, social justice, and otherwise. That's actually set us back, because I don't know how to put it. It's really appalling that a president will make this kind of executive fiat. If you check through the news, you see the way migrants are being treated and have been manhandled and have been kept in concentration camps. I think that's that for in terms of inclusivity. But in terms of the general fight against climate change, we are in for a bigger fight. And I think the emergence of Trump has actually set us more than 50 years back. So his emergence is not a good news for. We are not Americans, we are Nigerians. I'm a Nigerian, so definitely I won't actually have a say concerning the day-to-day activity of people in the United States. But as it affects, I think, the emergence of Trump, as a climate enthusiast, I knew his stand. So that's one thing you should know. If you be following the footsteps of Donald Trump, following his activity, you know his stand against climate change. You know his position. So we've actually, before we knew that, immediately he emerged, things are going to be very, very tough for us. So it's not a new thing. And thank you again. Let me go back a bit. Emma's mentioned, you've actually answered that, and I actually like the way you answered that. We are not saying that the commitment that the global north is actually trying to put as the developing nation is both an investment for the future and also a restitution for the harm they've caused. Because one, remember, they have all it takes to mitigate. They have all it takes. They have the technology. They have everything to fight against the impacts of these things. But let me use Nigeria for example. We don't have these things. So they have made that commitment. Don't forget that they've contributed over 90% to the position that we are today. So that's it. So it's both a restitution and also an investment for the future of the earth. But first of all, as an African, as a Nigerian, I think we should not make it something that is something is an handout. We are give it to South Sahara or give it to the developing nation. It should be compulsory. It should be a necessity. They should do it. We should ask them to do it. We should ask them to make that commitment. It's very key. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Etiete. Let me hear your thoughts on that, Emma, as regards Trump's entry into the office and White House, basically. How much of an impact do you think this would have on equity on the global scale?
Of course, it is a worrying time at the moment, particularly for anybody working in climate change or any kind of environmental protection. Projects all over the world. A lot of these things are US funded and have had their funding stalled or stopped temporarily, we hope. And all we can hope is that there are more actors in the government who are undergoing these review processes, and that they will see the value in ongoing environmental protection on a global scale. And I can see why he wants to direct things in a nationalistic way to the American people, but no country lives in isolation. It's one ocean, it's one atmosphere. These extreme weather conditions that we're seeing happening in America, that is affecting him and is costing billions in clearing up efforts and things. These are being also began in across on the other side of the world. So it's everybody's responsibility. And as one of the most wealthy nations that has profited for so long on relying on the global south and all across the world for buying all of their products, for getting all their resources from in the first place, they have a responsibility to also look after the problem, but also responsibility to themselves, because like I said, it's very short-term thinking to think I'll just turn the tap off now and that it won't come back and hit you 20, 30 years later. But I'm trying to stay positive. It's quite difficult. Because I think there are also rollbacks in many situations, and everything. The eyes of the world look to America as an example. And when we look at, for example, the the women's rights and things that are being rolled back in America. This has a knock-on effect all over the world. When people are reviewing equality issues.
Thank you so much, Emma. We've had some eye-opening discussions so far, and there's still a lot more to unpack as we push for sustainability. One major question remains that can transition to a secular economy truly benefit everyone? So we'll be taking a short break now, and when we return, we'll dive into those pressing issues on if secular economy transition would benefit everyone. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. You're still watching on Rights, Crime and Justice, coming to you from Gringo TV. Of course, we're getting to the talk on the secular economy, but before we get there, I want to come to the topic on gender-based violence, and I'll start with you, Itiete. There has been recent reports from Nigeria, especially, that show a dramatic rise in gender-based violence, and this has led to tragic losses and a significant increase in femicides rather. So I want to ask, what do you think are the underlying issues that contribute to this surge? Do you think it's from the aspect of our culture or legislative factors that enable such violence? Because when you look at it, how many of them are really properly persecuted? So I want to know, I want to hear your thoughts on that. What do you think are the factors that have enabled this rise in this level of gender-based violence?
Gender-based violence. First of all, let us streamline this. Let us get a proper definition. Now, when we are talking about gender-based violence, most of us do take it from the angle of females, of the female genders. Just the way the female gender is actually passing through violence, that's how the male gender are actually passing through violence. Let me tell you the truth. Men suffer violence in courts. That it is not actually, especially this part of the world, it is not actually proper for a man to actually come out in most cases to voice their frustration, for men to voice their frustration out. But in terms of the gender violence that the females actually suffer, yes, I'll give it. There's a level of cultural elements in there that maybe because there are some a no-go area in terms of the culture of our people. So it tends to make the women vulnerable. And also,
okay, sorry, Itiete, I want to stop you there. I just want to make a comment, because you said, of course, we focus more on men. But, I mean, I think the reason why that is the case is because in comparison to the level of violence that women face, of course, and this violence is usually fueled by of course, I'm not coming for anyone, but the reason why there's a lot more talks on female violence is because in comparison, they actually face more. You don't agree with that?
I don't completely agree with you, because if you are talking about the one that has spoken out, the one that is in the public, yes, I'm going to female actually being meted with violence, no doubt. But what about those silent ones that are kept inside? Do you have records of that? But like I said before, I would say I would just streamline my talk based on there's youth violence. One, again, cultural reason. Now, part of Africa, with due respect, there is a limited bias against the female gender. in terms of, let's even go talk about the property acquisition. Up till recently, I think there are in some parts of Africa, female cannot actually acquire property. Talk about right to inheritance. In some parts of this of women, even up to now, women don't have the right to acquire, to inherit properties. And this intends to weaken the female gender in terms of economic power. But he who has the economic power, it can't actually be oppressed. Can't actually be oppressed if you have a reasonable extent of economic power. Now, the female are actually down in terms of the economic ladder. Up to recently, that females are actually coming up little by little, and I think you can do that with that. Then also, we talk about the general insecurity of the land. So we shouldn't remove that. Generally, there's a rise of insecurity. Up to very recently, when the trend is coming down, go to the north, and there is the adoption of now women are soft targets. Now, because apart from the money we are getting for them, we use them as sex objects, we use them to procreate, and women are actually vulnerable in terms of this. So definitely it's on the rise, and I sympathize with men, and I think we should do more. The stronger vessel, as women are seen as we can be stronger vessel to do more in protecting the weaker. If you have energy, if you have power, you don't show it by oppressing or by perpetrating evil or perpetrating violence on the weaker vessel. So majorly, it is a challenge for both males and females, especially the males. They should not see women because they don't have both economic power and normal physical power. They should not see women as something that they can actually exert their frustration on. Because women, the fact remains that women are the bedrock of every society, and they shouldn't be victims of violence. They should be victims. They should be people that should be protected and guided, and make sure that. And funny enough, Africans, Nigerians, we should try and empower females, because when the females are empowered, they can actually defend themselves to a reasonable extent. One. Number two, also females should also learn skills in terms of defense techniques. It's very key. Apart from it's key, if you have female children, they should give them training how to defend themselves from these predators that actually see females as prey that they can prey on easily. But generally, what I try to say is that both male and female suffer violence, although from the one that is in the public domain, females suffer more. And I also encourage the men to speak out when you are being violated, when you are being meted at, different from both psychological and mental violence are being meted on. Speak out so that at least we can actually bring our own view outside. Yeah.
Oh yes, definitely. That's quite important. But I also want to point on to something that you said. Of course, as much as the men are the ones that should be able to protect the females, there's also the path of the government as well. Because when you look at it, it's a question of if this. Because you spoke about empowerment and all of that. We have a lot of programs on that. Skills. A lot of women are involved in a lot of things. But now, because I asked the question on if the legislative force also has a role to play in the rise of gender-based violence, because when you look at it, how many of these people are actually properly prosecuted for committing these crimes? So what role especially as well do you think the government has to play in ensuring that the society is more enabling and it's more protective for these people, not just women, like you said, of course men, but in terms of violence generally, whether gender-based or whatever kind of violence, how much would you say the government has been able to properly address it?
Yeah. I've actually made some little steps in terms of laws like this VAP law, violence against persons. With these laws, different laws that the government has actually enacted, they've actually done in terms of, like I did tell people, in terms of law. I don't think Nigeria is lacking. But the problem we have is implementing this law. It's at the implementation stage that's where we have problem. And like the government, the armed force, the police that are actually it's their primary responsibility, which is part of the executive, to implement laws. They should do more. And the government should not, the government should bring out more policy, more laws that will protect the weak gender, the weaker gender. Government should do more law. And I think, yes, we have laws, we have pronouncements that are actually encouraging, but I think we need more. We need more, and we also need to tell the law enforcement to make sure they enforce this law. They prosecute people that have been seen, that have been found wanting. And also, you want to take this part away, like the issue of rape. The society also play a very key role. Now, how do the society see rape victims? It's key. Do they see them? Do they stigmatize them? If I'm being raped and the society will stigmatize me if I speak out, why do I have to speak out? I'll keep it inside. Now, if I'm being raped, I report to the police. I'm the current director of strategy and mobilization of those society. And those society is the network society group based in Edo State. Now, there was a case someone brought to our office. The child, about 8-year-old, 7-year-old child was violated. They called them, they said they want to settle within the area. The person that did it got scot-free. It was someone that was passing ahead of the news. I said, madam, they can't do this to your child like this now. You must say, don't have money to even go to a police station. That's why I'm talking about economic power. They should empower the economy. Now, he said, I don't have money to police station to do this, do that. Say, so I don't have, I will just take it like that. The boy took the woman and the child, they brought them to our office. And we made sure we prosecute that case. And I think the predator, the violator, got up to 6 to 7 years in prison. So those are part of women. The society should not see rape, especially rape victims. They should not stigmatize them. When they stigmatize them, they discourage them from speaking out. And when they don't speak out, they die in silence. And the priest, the predator will still have more power to prey on them. So we should make sure the society has a role to play, government has a role to play, as law enforcers have a role to play. Then the family unit have it, because there are some cases we've handled. We tell them, let us prosecute this matter. The parents, let us leave it, let us just do it. So these are not only government, society, NGOs, organizations, they have a huge role to play. If I tell you a number of cases that we've actually handled, you will be amazed. In Edo State alone. So these are the ones that have actually spoken out. What about those females that have been violated? They don't have even money to go to the nearest police station to report. They don't have money to go and do common tests. And they don't also have the knowledge to know that when I'm passing through this, to look at the steps I'll take. That's where non-governmental organizations comes in. They need to teach these people the steps to take when they are being violated. Enough from what form of violation.
Yeah, thank you so much, Itiete, for that very deep perspective. Let me come to you now, Emma. Of course, we want to move to the topic on circular economy. So let's go to talks on the transition to that, which of course, when we look at circular economy, we know that it presents significant opportunities for sustainability and economic growth. But without a doubt, we can't deny that its implementation can be complex, especially for developing countries. So some have even argued that a shift to circular economy might widen economic disparities between the developed and the developing countries. So first of all, I want to know if you agree with that school of thought, and if not, I'm sure you wouldn't. So, but if not, how can we ensure that the circular economy actually creates more inclusive opportunities rather than reinforcing the existing inequalities that we're already facing on the global scale?
Well, I think, first of all, people have to stop thinking of the circular economy as waste management, because it isn't just about recycling. It isn't about waste collection. Of course, that's a main part. It is an important part of it, but it's also about reducing and reusing products, and particularly packaging, for example, or textiles or e-waste or all of these things. And these can create new whole industries of service economy around washing, logistics, renting things out. These can be whole new like economic sectors that can be opened up if done properly. But like you say, you do have to really like work with the people who are doing these jobs right now, because they don't have a voice. Like quite often they're not organized, they're informal. Like for example, the informal waste sector, which is often women or children or people who don't have access to the internet or these sorts of decision-making things, and they need to be included, and there are conditions included into a new system, and there are conditions raised, their health and safety, for example, their contracting, their compensation, all needs to be raised within a system. And we believe that the circular economy, cleaning up in general, I mean, just the environmental effects of a circular economy will benefit people health-wise, but also economically wise, because plastic pollution, all kinds of pollution and climate change affects people's livelihoods right now. We're already seeing plastic pollution affecting fishing stocks, for example, or for coastal communities that are dependent on tourists, money coming in. All of these things are badly affected by pollution and climate change. So a circular economy, cleaning things up, should improve those things, but we do have to be very careful with it, and that's why that they need to be involved in the negotiation process and involved in creating these solutions.
All right, thank you so much, Emma. We're wrapping up the program now, and finally, just looking ahead in the continuation of the fight towards social justice everywhere. Just your final thoughts on what concrete steps do you think need to be taken to make inclusion a reality? How can we tackle the inequality that we see in all its forms and protect the people, especially the most vulnerable people in different communities? Just your final thoughts on what next steps need to be taken. Well, that's to you, Emma.
Yeah. Well, we want to, like I said before, we want to make sure that those who don't have a voice now are represented when it comes to these big political negotiations, and also when it comes to action on the ground. The grassroots community organizations need to be included within these things, because they have the greatest understanding of what works in their communities, but they need financial and technical support. And like my fellow panelists said, this needs to be mandated, it needs to be written in stone, so it's not just a philanthropic handout. It needs to be regulated and it needs to be enforced. And we also want to push, very importantly, for corporate responsibility, because the big companies, big global multinational companies who are benefiting from all of these resources and do not pay remotely towards its waste mitigation and the climate change effects that it has. So they need that, this all needs to be written into corporate responsibility, and they need to be forced to pay. If you bring something to the market, anything, you need to be responsible for what happens to it at the end of the life, and that impact it has on the people affected by it.
Thank you so much, Emma, for joining in on the program. It's good to have you. Let me also have your final thoughts, Itiete. Of course, as we move and continue in the fights towards social justice everywhere, what concrete steps do we need to take, especially you can bring in the African perspective, of course, to make inclusion a reality?
Africa should be treated like a continent that has been wronged. Great injustice has been done to us, and we should be treated as such, because we can't just sit and fold our hands and watch this injustice being done to us, because we are actually part of the vulnerable group. African are vulnerable. And also, I think in terms of concrete steps, the less privileged ones, the less privileged should be given more voice to express themselves. The vulnerables should be included in every decision making, even at the table there. Because when they are making these big decisions, most of the community-based organizations, they are not there, they are not seated there, they are not represented there. They just make decisions, take decisions, and make deliberation, drink and pop champagne, make merry and go home and relax. But if the people that have been affected directly, if they're actually sitting at the table, I don't think they will treat it. So more of the vulnerable ones should be included. Government should, each country government should do more in terms of fostering, because it's not just up there. At the local level, inclusivity should also be practiced, not just at the level of the UN, at the level of the continental level, or at the country level. We should go down to the local community level. Everybody should be included. When we are included like that, we see definitely everything will go, and the aim and objective that we are trying to reach in terms of social justice, in terms of carrying everybody along, will actually be achieved. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Itiete and Emma, for joining in on the program. Very lovely conversation there. As is very obvious, one thing we need to understand is that social justice is not just a concept, but it's a call to action. Addressing the inequalities obviously requires deliberate efforts in every sector, like we've heard our experts say. And while the World Day of Social Justice obviously always serves as a reminder of these ongoing struggles, the work does not end with that single day of recognition. True justice is only found in the actions we take every day, and of course the policies that are being pushed. And so as the conversation continues, let's be sure to keep the momentum going. And on that note, we wrap up today's program. Many thanks for watching. I'm Tony Ogubanjo. It's bye for now.